You hear me?
I can. Is it clocking on your end? Oh, there it is.
Okay, I think we are now live. Good. Okay, fantastic. So, well, I did mention, didn't I? This was our first webinar. So my apologies. I see that we have got, do you know what? We've actually got more people back in the room, I think, than we had originally. So that's.
I guess that was Remco's idea of a webinar mic drop.
Yeah. That's Remco out.
Remco out.
Goodness me. Yeah.
Well,
Remco
you know,
out.
I once fell off the stage at a presentation, and it was almost
Really?
oh yeah, but I just told them I do my own stunts, so everyone was happy.
Fantastic. So we're building people back in. I see we have 38 back in the room. We had 135. You probably may not have noticed, but so we're building people back in. So if you're back and joining us, thank you. Apologies for the the errors on our part. As I said, this is our first webinar. We are learning, and I think one of us might have hit the wrong button by accident. So, and obviously we won't blame anybody for that at all. But his name ends in an O and begins in a Ren. So as we're missing one panelist. So. Okay, cool. So we're just waiting for Irit back to join us back. And whilst we're doing that, just to say, great conversation, guys. Thank you. Also in the chat, fantastic conversation going on in the chat. Thank you, all of you who are attending for your contributions in the chat window. That really helps us. And yeah, good to get your input, and it helps us as well because we can see what direction to take the conversation in. So I am going to go ahead and continue on, even though we're missing one of our panelists, which is Irit Ezips. I don't know what's happened to her. Hopefully she'll be back in a minute.
I will text her.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you so much. So what we'll do is we'll carry on with our second conversation. So let me just go to the okay, so we've actually lost our presentation as well, so I won't add it back in. I'm just going to ad-lib it, as it were, without the slide, but you've got the agenda, guys, anyway. I've emailed it across to you before. So for our second topic, we're going to discuss a subject that's actually very dear to my heart, and as such, that's why you get me again to host this session. And the title is Worry Less About Account Health and More About Customer Outcomes. So let me introduce the topic to you, and I'll be brief with that, as obviously time is tight now, and then I'll get the panel members to debate it as soon as I can. So here's the concept of what I'm trying to get to, and I'm just going to say to my panel if they would be kind enough just to mute themselves just for a couple of minutes. I'm going to be 2 or 3 minutes introducing it, and then I'll get to you. So one of the amazing advances, I think we're all agreed in customer success, that has occurred, is the rise in dedicated software platforms that have been designed for us, for customer success management, which is great. It's great to go digital, and with the right software and the right approach, these platforms can be immensely beneficial to a customer success team. And it would be difficult, if not frankly just impossible, for a customer success team to scale, to grow beyond a handful, because it's just too unwieldy to manage and control all the data using the spreadsheet approach that Rav was talking about earlier. That is great at first, but we grow out of it, and we need something more sophisticated, more complex to handle more sophisticated and complex data storage analysis and reporting needs that we have. So and not to mention all the other issues around, like providing access to it, controlling access to it, securing it, making sure the data is accurate, high quality. So effectively, I am a believer in and an advocate for the use of customer success software systems. They are essential tools. They allow us to be productive, to maintain quality, and to grow our team and scale our team. However, here's my concern. I do have a concern, and that is, if we're not careful, we may find that the software starts to change what we do. It starts to change how we function, and what we focus our time on doing, just simply because of the nature of a software tool, which helps to bring structure to us, but then it's, if you like, imposing to an extent, at least, obviously they're configurable, a certain amount of structure on us, and it makes certain aspects of the role more simple to do, which allows us to do them more and do them better, and maybe doesn't help so much in other areas that maybe we start to do less, but they might be important. That's what I'm getting at. And in particular, it feels to me that partly because the software does make it relatively easy to measure each customer using internal metrics that are the same for every customer. And of course, we all know what those are: NPS, numbers of logins, CSAT scores, support utilization rates, all of those sorts of things that we can measure per customer, and we can compare each customer, and they're all the same things for every customer. Obviously different data, but it's the same data points, the same metrics. That's great. And they're really useful, but it's not the only part of the picture. And partly, I think, also due to a growing need to use exactly those statistics to measure ourselves as a customer success team, justify ourselves to the rest of the company, because we can compare 12 months ago with today and say, look how our NPS score has improved, or look how support utilization is better, or look at how the difference in CSAT, or whatever it is. And that's all great, and there's a real value in having those metrics available for comparative analysis, but we mustn't become over fixated on account health as calculated by these things, and stop worrying, which I think we should be worrying, about the true causes of customer churn, which, put simply, is not their NPS score or their CSAT or their numbers of logins or any of those statistics. It's about whether or not the customer is realizing real value, sufficient value from their purchases. And when I say value, I'm not saying that NPS or numbers of logins don't help us with that. They are indirect indicators of account health for sure. But what I am saying is that these things do not excite the customer. There are other equally important things that CSMs seem to be focusing less on these days, and that do relate directly to customer outcomes. But it's harder to do because these are the things that the customer wants us to look at, and customer wants to measure, and the customer wants to analyze, and that prove the value to the customer, and not all customers are the same. So this is where it's not about comparative analysis, customer to customer to customer. It's about working with customer X on customer X's outcomes, and customer Y may have different ones. May not. It might be very similar. Very likely they will be, because we're selling the same product. But nevertheless, we've got to use their metrics, their KPIs in their language. So I have, in my experience, I've met many, thousands, literally, of customer success managers. I have met, worked with hundreds of teams. I have seen many individual CSMs who I know can tell me the exact NPS score of an average, or go to their tool and find the NPS score for any customer you want, right? But if I ask them, can you demonstrate the direct link between what the customer's doing with your product and the objectives that the customer originally said they wanted to see, then I would not necessarily get an answer, and certainly not from everybody. And surely that is what we should be focusing on. So essentially, when a CSM commences a new customer engagement, my belief is their first job is to find the answer to that one question. What does my product or service need to help you to do to make it an invaluable tool for you? And then the second question to that, if you like, is, well, then how are we going to measure that? And that is not in NPS scores, guys. So, all right. In short, my contention is this: customer success managers need to become far better at researching, analyzing, and truly understanding their customers' outcomes. Doing so will help them to become more business relevant, which is the ability to be on the same metaphorical page as the customer's senior stakeholders. This will help them not only to maximize the value that their product or service delivers, but it will prove that value in terms that are 100% meaningful to those senior stakeholders. And it helps them form deeper and more meaningful relationships with those stakeholders. But to do this takes a lot of time and effort that cannot be expended elsewhere. And unlike the standard metrics, you can't just set it up and run them for every single customer identically. So that is my contention. And I want to now, if I may, turn to the panel to chat about this. Oh, and Irit, you're back, which is lovely. Thank you very much. So
the refresh thing.
So well, I hope this isn't too controversial. We'll see whether people agree or disagree, and if you do disagree, that's absolutely fine. So let me ask you this as a start point to the conversation then. Do you agree with this contention that I'm saying? Do you think that there is an issue around us starting to do a bit too much navel gazing around how we measure ourselves internally and prove our value internally without then, which is essential, but without then focusing on what our job is, which is customer success, helping the customer and enabling the customer to measure their success. Anyone want to volunteer to go first? Please feel free. Miranda.
Sorry, after you, Miranda, go for it.
Okay, well, thank you. Look, I agree with the sentiment. I agree with everything you're saying. As a customer success leader, I probably wouldn't sleep for nights if I had to think about all the customers in my portfolio and every single one of their outcomes. So what I'm trying to say is, while I agree with this wholeheartedly, and I think that it is something we need to do, we also still need that common language. We need to be able to have certain quantitative measurements that we can utilize to understand in a snapshot where our portfolios are. And outcomes, while they're great, and this is definitely something every customer success leader should have in practice on their team. I have it on my teams. We review these outcomes in, check-ins, and during business reviews, we set up new goals, and we understand, like, we're here, we need to be here. What are the things we need to do in between in order to get to this said goal? And do you, dear customer, agree that you will participate in this, journey to your success? Because I can't, fabricate this success for you. But because it is, yes, there are measurable stop points, but there's a lot of qualitativeness to it. It makes it a little bit harder as a leader for me just to look at, we now have 75, I think, agencies, and some of them are globally. It's hard for me to take a look at this portfolio and say, how many folks are in this outcome bucket or this outcome bucket, because of what you said. Outcomes are so different. Everyone's solving for different things. Like I said, we have to have a snapshot, whatever that may be. I need to be able to just take a quick look at a report and kind of be able to surmise what my team is doing and how we're rolling.
Thank you, Miranda. Rav, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I echo Miranda's point completely there. I don't think it's either or, Rick. I think, and I think it's not a binary, should we focus on health versus metrics? I think, if I understand the question, it's like, is there too much weighting towards looking at the health, right? But I think the premise of the question is missing.
Perhaps even more specifically, Rav, not enough rating towards, which I know is the other side of the same coin. But my point is that I think that what's crept in is because it's easier to do. Which, Miranda, it's easier to do, right? You said it yourself, right? Because it's easier to do, we do it. Whereas the other one, as Miranda said, it's harder to do. And maybe we could easily fall into the trap of not doing it.
I think
here's what I have done to solve for that is my health score actually has a component that is completely driven around a manual input. And that manual input is completely around the sentiment of the conversations and the dialogue you're having, and also how are we moving along on the projects and the outcomes, right? That's how I've solved for it, to where I have that quick snapshot of how are we doing overall. But it is hard. It's really hard. And it's hard because it's not something that you or your team has control over. You have to have active participation, especially at the B2B enterprise level. And in the new world we're in, getting active participation is hard. It was hard before COVID. It is harder now. People just don't have time. They're distracted. I've said it in the other session, people are being laid off. They're doing more with less. They don't want to talk to their customer success manager. They don't have time for that. So we have to continuously be showing value and figuring out how do we keep them engaged and moving down the line of reaching those outcomes. And it is challenging.
I have a theory on why that is, Miranda.
Is it because they don't like me?
I was trying to shake my head. I didn't mean that. No, of course they like you. I think it's because we're not providing enough value in those conversations. We're not people that are interesting to them, because we're talking about adoption and bugs and critical issues, and we're not talking about outcomes. So I think when you look at the typical health scoring frameworks out there, a lot of it is you want them to be proactive. You want them to be indicators of future retention, right? But a lot of times they're not. NPS is not. It's a lagging indicator,
Definitely.
right? And adoption, utilization, those are really utilization is a lagging indicator in a lot of ways, right? If the usage of your system drops, it might be too late to save that customer by that time. I've worked in a company before where usage of the platform was compulsory, right? So you could never look at it. If they were going to leave, they made that decision well before the usage dropped, right? So I think better leading indicators for CSMs are: how many relationships do you have in place? How strong are these relationships? I see Zeev in the comments. He's like the master of defining and measuring this. You should see some of his dashboards. How many, what level, what height in the organization? What's the depth of the conversation? And then, are we having an outcome conversation? I would settle to begin with to know that all of my top tier customers, somebody on my team is just having that conversation. We have a joint success plan in place with them. We've had that conversation within the past 90 days. So I think those are maybe better health indicators that at least let us know we're doing the parts that we can control to drive the relationship.
I agree 100% with you, Jay. And I would also take it one step further and say, not only are we not having the right conversations, we're not getting the right people in those conversations. Totally. I would take it just one step further, right? And, if we're having conversations with the person that signed the check, because they're the ones that are going to sign the check again, we're setting ourselves up for failure. We have to figure out who are the folks that are within the organization that are going to be your business case, that are going to be the ones that are going to move the needle on making your product stickier and relevant. And those are generally not the same people. So,
Irit, any thoughts from yourself?
Well, I thought there were a couple of things that you said that I wanted to address. One, I hear a lot of people say, hey, you have to understand why the customer originally bought. And I get why people say that is because sometimes the sales team just doesn't tell you, and they don't introduce you to the right people, the right accounts. And then, so how can you be successful? And I get that that's why people say that. But suppose that you were able to connect with the right stakeholders and ask the right questions and got why they wanted to buy your software. In year one, your mission as a customer success manager is to prove that you have provided some sort of value that connects with that original goal. However, after year two, or during year two, sometimes in year two, you need to dig in deeper. It's not enough to just provide the desired outcome of the original thought of why they should get your solution. If it's a singular outcome and that's all the value you're going to get because that's what you're focused on, what was the original? Let me tell you, like after 5 years, who cares why they originally bought your software? That's first of all. Second of all, if that's the whole thing that they're going to do with you and you have other outcomes that they can achieve with you, two things might happen. First of all, they're not maximizing value. And second of all, someone else with a similar singular use case can come in, talk to the procurement manager, give them the deal of a lifetime. And before you know it, even though the usage is high, obviously because they need it, you're going to get a churn cancellation notice. So the way to prevent that is to stop asking ourselves, why did the customer originally bought our software? And start thinking about what other things should this customer be really getting out of our software. Absolutely. And the way to do it is to really starting to take a more leadership role with your customers. So that's the other thing that you said is like, hey, you need to know exactly what are the outcomes that your customer wants. What are the metrics that your customer wants to track in order to understand value? That's true if you're working with very mature organizations. My experience is that a lot of times, even highly regarded executives don't always track the right metrics, or they don't know.
No,
They
don't.
may have come from a different department. Not everybody has this vertical, right, rise to the top. And a lot of times, if you were to be a strong partner for them, you need to help them benchmark themselves against others that have a similar team and say, hey, this is what other teams similar to yours that work with us look like if they're best in class. And that should not just include your software. You should tell them what kind of processes they have, what kind of metrics do they track. You can't just rely on the customer to keep educating you on what's important. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to them at all, but don't take the passive seat only. Be that trusted advisor. That's how you establish it. Be that trusted advisor by saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing. What are you doing? What from what I'm showing is relevant for you? And then make a really powerful partnership.
And this, in my opinion, and this is how we really add value, right? But the product is already doing stuff, right? Or can do stuff.
Correct.
What the value we add is as business consultants, effectively, as customer success managers who understand the product in the sense of, not like a product specialist, but in the sense of how to apply the product to get value. And that, I think, is the crucial thing. And we have the consultative skills to help that customer on that journey, who, as you say, may or may not be mature themselves in terms of their understanding of how to do that. Christy, did you want to come in on anything?
Yeah, I actually, me and Jay were messaging here. I'm like trying to figure out how do you play double dutch, right, and get into the conversation without over somebody else. Yeah, so no, I had a couple thoughts. I had a couple thoughts on Miranda's points as well. So I'm going to start with that since she spoke first. But with regards to the health score, one of the things that we've done is we've built our health score so that green is like the ideal customer state. First of all, it's almost impossible to get there. So we're not using it as a risk indicator. I'm using it to identify what more could or should we be doing with these customers to get them to, again, that ideal state of engagement and partnership. So I'm not using it to say, oh my gosh, and I'm not reacting to red or bad metric scores or things of that nature. I've designed it such that it's almost working in reverse. But one of the things that I did add into it is we are using, the way that we think about this is that to really truly understand the customer's outcome, it actually almost has nothing to do with your product at all or why they're engaging with you, right? Their business outcome, their to-be state is much larger than us. We only play one small part in helping them achieve that, right? It's going to be their people, their processes, partners, different technology, right? It's a much larger ecosystem. And so I think the first thing is we have to understand what role we play as their partner in that, in achieving that, because they might never achieve that goal. We might do our part. We might actually do everything we're supposed to, but because there's so many outside elements to them actually getting there, if we don't understand that holistically, we're never going to be successful. So I think it's understanding the bigger outcome goal and then understanding the product outcome, right? So specifically, what are they expecting us to deliver in order to get them there? And I think if we're not having that bigger conversation going way beyond what role we play, we're missing the point, right? Like, I don't think we're even having an appropriate outcomes conversation. So tactically, how we're tracking that is that, again, as I mentioned earlier, we use Gainsight. We're using our success plans and we're using our advantage on those plans to actually help us indicate what progress we're making. Because everything we've outlined there is tied to that bigger business goal. Our objectives are these smaller milestones of engagement that are very clear and very measurable. And then all of the tactics that are built underneath that help us understand how we're marching towards that. So if we're not advancing those activities and those tasks and we're not checking those boxes, then we're clearly not getting any closer to that. So we use our advancement in those plans to help us understand when we need to intervene, when we need to escalate, when we need to kind of be that voice to say, hey, listen, Mr. Customer, we're not successful, but this isn't our fault. We're not delivering, right? Sometimes it's they're not doing their part. And if we set clear expectations and we're all looking at the same stuff, then we should be able to and empowered to say, listen, we're not moving forward. You're not going to see value. And here is why, and actually have a true partnership conversation. So tactically, that's what we're using to help guide that and make it less about NPS or this or that or usage. Those are all important. And they're part of my health score, even if they pay their bills on time, those are all part of my health score. But more importantly, we put a heavier weighting because we can weight them on how we're advancing in these plans. So that's how I'm tactically managing.
Thank you so much, Christy. That's great. Now, Rav, I know you've got something you want to say. I just want to see if Jay wants to come in because I don't think Jay said anything as yet in this conversation. So just want to check in on Jay, and then I'll come to you, Rav.
I'll defer my time to Rav because I think I did get a point in there. So I'll let you speak, Rav.
It's like the Senate. It's like the Senate. I was with a filibustered, and then
your 30 seconds start
yield
now.
my time.
Yeah, thank you. I read my time to the gentleman from Twickenham. Right. Okay. I just going back to your original question, Rick. I think if you are seeing a trend where there is an overemphasis on health and health metrics and moving the needle on these metrics, I think it's symptomatic of two things. One, it's a team that actually hasn't defined the value it's adding to its own business, so it's focusing on activity, right? And I'll give you a story about this. I was in a leadership meeting in Seattle in the company I worked for, and my opposite number said, "Hey, we did 65 executive business reviews this quarter. How many did you guys do?" So we didn't do any. He goes, "What do you mean you didn't do any?" "But my net revenue retention is 144, right?" So that's an example of actually thinking activity correlates to.
Rob, let me share a similar story. Is I worked with a customer success team based in New York and Dublin as the two places. They flew to us, so it was Dublin that we met. And I asked them how they measured themselves, and they measured themselves on the numbers of journeys that they had and the numbers of conversations that they had. And again, it's completely activity. Now, actually, I think that activity is really important to measure, but it was just that they're measuring the wrong activity.
Exactly. And then on the flip side of that, if you haven't defined internally what's the value that we're adding and what we're aiming towards, and that's probably because you're actually not aligned as a team to a headline metric that's important to the business at the stage that the business is in. Yeah. In the early stage, it's probably going to be a product-related metric, time to value. Later stage, it's probably going to be a sentiment metric. Latest, even more mature stage is going to be a revenue metric, right? If you're not aligned, you've just got activity. The flip side of that is on the customer side. If you haven't set benchmarks at certain parts of the journey to say, this level of activity correlates in our experience to some kind of potential value that we will then qualify with you, then you're just focusing on doing the reviews and the activities, etc. So it's actually, you really got to stop and think about, I've got two customers. How am I adding value to my customer? And how am I adding value to my own business? And you have to be able to draw the line.
I agree.
Health metrics are really good, as to Miranda's point, for prioritization.
Absolutely.
Right? That's what they're really useful for. As a leading indicator of churn, you have to have a massive amount of time and a massive data set to even get a hope of figuring that out. But as a way of saying I've got limited resource and I need to know where to place my bets, it's super useful.
So unfortunately, I want to wrap this up now. And I know it's terrible because we just started. Now we have to end. So it's totally our fault. Take responsibility. Myself, we lost about 10 minutes in sort of messing about. So I had lots of questions I want to ask you about this topic, but let me just ask you this as an end point to this conversation before we go on to the third topic with Philip, which is around, my belief is that at least part of the reason why there's a lack of what I believe to be sufficient focus on helping customers attain their outcomes is because I don't think that customer success managers have the right skills. I don't think that they know how to be business consultative. And I also don't think that they have necessarily all the right tools to help them, the process to help them to achieve that. So let me throw that open to Miranda. Please do start.
Yeah, I mean, I partially agree with that. And I think, customer success is maturing. We're learning every day. Where we were 5 years ago is definitely not where we are now. I will say, though, I think, this is just from my personal experience. I've done customer success quite a few different companies with quite a few different business models now, everything from B2B, B2C, B2B2C. And it's all comes down to resources for me, honestly. We just do not have enough. It goes right back to Rob said, time, resources, budget, right? I wrote it down because I really liked how simple that was, but we don't have the time. We don't have the resources because we don't have the budget. And that means that we can't give everyone that type of attention or be that business partner. I think, you hire folks that have the aptitude to learn or that are already there and you bring them along, but sometimes they really get lost in the shuffle because there's so much noise every day.
And I don't think it's a CSM issue, Rick. I think it's a leadership issue. Because if from a leadership perspective, metrics govern behavior, software doesn't. So the tool is not driving the CSM to do certain things. It's the metrics on how you're measuring them. And if the leadership are not concerned with the right metrics, value, outcome, ROI, whatever it is, then you're just going to get that reflected behavior in the tool.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm blaming the CSM. I'm just stating the facts of how I see
they're just the reality. That's just where the reality.
Fault.
Yeah, but that's just where the reality manifests, though, isn't it? That's where the reality manifests. It doesn't.
Well, to be quite honest with you, I would say that everything is down ultimately to the responsibility of the senior management.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. If you set a goal that say, well, actually, what I'm measuring you on in the one-to-ones, I'm going to ask you why your activity count is very low. That's what they're going to optimize for, right? End of story.
Okay, I can see a certain enigmatic smile on Christie's face. So let's end with Christie's thoughts on this, and I'll hand over to Philip. Unless anyone else wants to sort of butt in, feel free. But otherwise, Christie, please do.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my initial point in the first topic, which is enablement, right? So if it does come down to the folks not having the right skills, how are you up-leveling their skill set, right? And so I think it's diversification of teams. I don't think that enough teams focus on diversity and finding out where your gaps are, right? Where does your team have that coverage? Where are they strong? And then as you're hiring, making sure that you're hiring for the gaps on your team. And then using those resources so that you guys can kind of cross-pollinate knowledge and up-level each other. And then again, back to the point of everything falling on the leader. Yes, I agree, which is also why I've put so much emphasis on enablement and training, because not everyone, I mean, to Miranda's point, right? Like, you're not going to find everyone, you're not going to find a unicorn to hire every single hire, right? And you need folks that are SMEs. You need some people that are just going to get stuff done. You're going to need people with all different kind of skills and experience. And so what can we do to bridge that? And, for me personally, outside of enablement, I've also done things as simple as we've created structured playbooks for all of our products such that they are tied to use cases and value. So it really takes the guesswork out of it. If my customers don't know what to do, if my team doesn't know what to do, we've provided it. We've told you exactly, we've given you a blueprint. This is how you're going to be successful. These are the points of measurement. And honestly, it's a playbook in our tools and we deploy it. So I'm helping my team through creating the processes, giving them the resources to be successful. I'm investing in them from training enablement, and I'm ensuring that I'm diversifying my team as I scale to bridge the gap across everybody. So that's how I'm going to address your point there, Rick.
Thank you so much. That is great. Does anyone want to just say one last thing before I hand over to Philip for our topic 3?
Just don't kick us off the call.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
Yeah, don't hang up.
There's this big red button called end call, and I'm going to avoid it like the plague. I promise not to press that button. Oops. Okay,
take a
guys.
Screenshot for Remco.
Poor old Remco. I will now hand over to Philip Wolf, and he'll take you through topic number 3. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Rick.
And we all remained. It worked.
Some really good points in the chat. Some good stuff in there.
Yeah, there's a good discussion going on about, okay, this is great, but how do you think about this for SMB? And I think it's all about knowing the customer and understanding who they are and what their drivers of their outcomes are, even if you can't control those outcomes. And then being able to build your process around it at scale.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one of the important things that we haven't called out enough here is, not all things are equal across every company, every customer portfolio, right? I've been in seed, Series A, Series B, and honestly, when you're a Series A, you wear all hats. You literally clean out the refrigerator, you open the mail, you do support, you do success, you do sales, right? So I think we just need to call that out, like, not everything is going to be beautiful and fluid. And if it's not beautiful and fluid, it doesn't mean you're failing.
Hey guys, wow, that was a thrill. I wasn't sure will it end or not, but it looks like this time it worked pretty fine. Yeah, nice to meet you guys all. My name is Philip. I'm the founder and CEO of Castify. We are one of those customer success solutions that you guys discussed before. And great discussion so far. Love it. Also, thanks for everyone in the audience for all your questions and comments. Appreciate it a lot. I will also keep an eye on those while we discuss here. My topic, a topic that is quite common these days is like customer success versus customer support. One of our most viewed blog article by far is actually customer success versus customer support, and how do they, what's the differences there. It's something that people really, really look for all the time. Also, that when we onboard our customers, we meet a lot with the customer success teams, because we have this kind of concierge onboarding where we do really a deep dive into their team, their goals and so on. And then we all, of course, also come across their history. How did they come there? What is the team's responsibility? So recently, that's why this matches a little bit with this crisis, because recently we saw a lot of initiatives happening in companies, in the SaaS companies, on customer success. Hey, we need retention. We need to do something about retention. We need to focus on reducing the churn because new business will be slow and so forth. So there's a lot going on in many SaaS companies right now. And very often, our feeling is that when the management decides to do something about customer success and implement a strategy, they simply go in the support team and split it in half and say, okay, you guys are the new customer success team. And you guys from now on are called customer success managers, no longer customer support. Now, my question to you guys is maybe we first, what's in your opinion and in your experience, what's the main differences between those two when it comes to focus and responsibilities? And what is the danger for these companies? And maybe there's people in the audience that have experience with that. What is the danger, but just renaming the existing customer support people to be customer success managers from tomorrow without a proper strategy? Whoever wants to go and has an opinion there. Jay, you.
I'm like a dog on a bone with this one. I think it erodes the overall profession of customer success when we call support customer success. I do believe that a support team is a critical function under the umbrella of customer success, right? If you don't have an organization that can react to reported customer issues and needs and challenges and do that at scale, then everybody is getting dragged down into that activity in one way or the other, right? All the way up to the CEO. So I think there's a lot of confusion out there. Customer success is a buzzword. It's a buzz phrase right now still. And so, simply changing the name of your support team to customer success isn't good enough, because then there's this whole piece that's still missing, right? Which is, we're not doing reactive customer support there. We're actually proactively planning and thinking about and understanding. We're continuing the conversation that we had in the sales cycle, all the way through the customer life cycle, from new customer onboarding all the way through optimization, expansion, and renewal. So that's my high level thoughts on it, at least.
When I hear, I get this anger in me when I hear of companies that just take their customer support team and say, okay, I'm giving you this customer success title. Congratulations, you're all now customer success managers. And there's a few reasons for that. One, the skill sets, they're very different. They're, of course, if you put it on a Venn diagram, there's going to be overlap, right? But they're very different. They're very different in the outcomes, the goals, what they should be doing. So one, you're not setting your team up for success when you do that. If you're just donning them as customer success, you're not setting your customers up for success. You're not setting your company up for success. And also, we've worked so hard as an industry to really show everyone what is the difference between customer support and customer success. We've evangelized it. We've, taught on it. And when I see companies do this, it feels like it just undoes all of the work that we've done to show the value of customer success. So this is one of those hot topics for me. I continue.
Yeah, trust me, it happens a lot. I can tell you from practical experience, this happens a lot.
Absolutely.
Maybe follow-up question.
You know what's worse?
Sorry. Yeah.
What's worse is that it's not just ends with support. You take an implementation team and you call them customer success manager,
True.
And they don't even look to deliver first value. They just look to deliver the system. Or you have an account manager, an account executive, even worse, and you call them customer success. Or you take the customer experience, which is more of a, end user experience, and you call them customer success. Or you take the TAMs, the technical account managers, or the solution consultants that are super like much more technical people, and you call them customer success managers. It just goes on and on. Let's just slap that title to whomever is interacting with a customer. That's not how it should be. And I think that the issue with support is just the tip of the iceberg of how
it's true.
Right.
Raf, you want to
I was going to say, I think a lot of the
managers are about is really the charger for anyone in this panel to really explain the world, and everybody in this forum that is even just listening to this panel to get the word out there of what customer success managers should really be about. What is this role about?
I was going to say, I think a lot of the confusion comes from people interchangeably talking about the role and the function. So customer success function could have support in it, could have services in it, blah, blah, blah. And then obviously a CSM is a specific role, which is, as to Rick alluded to, a more consultative role. Yeah. And I think, Jay, you hit the nail on the head there with the word reactive, right? So one is inherently reactive and transactional. The other one is proactive and engagement-based. That's the fundamental difference. And to Miranda's point there, the danger is that thing around skill set, right? If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? That's the problem, right? So, if I'm a support person and I'm told, now you're a success manager, my view of the world is going to be product, feature, break, fix, escalation.
That's a great point. Maybe to flip this question a bit, what do you guys think? Is there a chance? I mean, for those companies, it's a real world scenario. So those companies really, they are there. Either they go for funding, and the investments companies will tell them, what are you doing about your retention and what's about the churn, and then they have to react super fast and build up this team. So is there anything that they can do in a sense of personas that are in their teams, support, or all the others that were mentioned? Is there personas that qualify that they can use to train them as customer success managers, or to develop them into a customer success carrier, in a sense of being faster versus like taking some existing resources versus being having to hire everyone new and from scratch? Do you guys have any practical tips for the audience that might be in exactly this situation where they look for personas within the existing company structure that might be account management, customer support, which qualify in order to go there? And then, as a follow-up question, what would they need to do in order to become good customer success managers, these that match the personas?
Okay, I'll go, but I would love to have Miranda actually list out the skills, because I know she's got it. But before she does, I just wanted to say this. There's closeted CSMs in support, and right? But then here's the other thing that you need to think about. Even if you do inherently have the skill set that can make you a great CSM, and you're just like in the wrong group, there's things that you're being taught as in support. And I constantly talked about it with younger folks that are starting their careers. Be a little picky if you can about the jobs you take, because you're going to learn certain behaviors in every job, and they're going to shape who you are as a professional. And I think that sometimes the inherent risk in working in support for too long, so to speak, is that you adapt a lot of habits that you will need to get rid of as soon as you hit the ground and become a CSMs. And with that, I'm going to turn the baton to Miranda.
I actually, I talk a lot about this. I talk a lot about what skills you need and what, thanks, Rate. So if I think about what I look for in skill sets when I'm hiring a customer success manager, and I want to make sure I'm answering the question. Can you repeat the question? I'm so sorry.
What is the like? Imagine yourself, right? So the CEO comes to your desk, says, "Hey, we need this team. You have free access to anyone in the company. what would you go for, and how would you practically approach this to get a team of 5? Let's say you have a company of 100, you need a team of 5, let's say end of next week. How do you do that? What is the personas that you look for in the existing teams? What is the literature you give them? What is the coaching you give them eventually to get that started? Okay, next week might be a little bit fast, but you know how those things go. Let's say in 2 weeks, right? So you have a very limited amount of time to get that team running with the existing resources without going through hiring processes and all.
One, I would laugh because that's just not possible to do in 2 weeks. Maybe it is, but maybe not. I hate to say this, but I would definitely look in other teams internally and see who I have that has the right skill sets or has the ability to adapt and learn. And I know that customer support is not customer success, but I have had many great customer support professionals move into customer success and do so successfully. I've also had many folks come from account executives and account management move over to customer success because they don't want to do sales and very successfully have customer success relationships. Other things that I would do to get those 5 and bring them up is, of course, hit the ground running with the, networking and things like that. But that's a really tall order to say, hey, we need to have 5 customer success managers up and running in 2 weeks. And I would really push back and challenge anyone that says that they can do so and do so successfully. Because I personally wouldn't want to turn 5 CSMs loose to manage such an important function in such a short period of time without finding the right individuals. And apologies, I was multitasking earlier. You all caught me and I couldn't my company is waking up on the East Coast. So
Philip, I think to answer that question, you have to think about baseline set of competencies and then what's specific for your product, service, or industry, right? Because in some companies, actually having domain or specific product expertise is actually vital for CS to add value to the customer and the business. In others, it's not. So I created a team. Actually founded the global success team at Slack by explaining to Stuart that actually we have to solve a change management problem, not a technical product problem. And what we need to build is a practice of people of digitally changed enabled. That's very different to what I did at Zendesk, which is actually understanding the domain of a customer service manager is far more important. So you draw from a different crowd. But I think some of the core base competencies you should look out for in any CS person are, they've got a track record of working with customers. I'm not going to take someone from an accounts back office who doesn't deal with customers. That's probably not a good place to start. Someone who's consultative, to Rick's point, someone who's really good at doing discovery and asking questions and being able to apply those answers to real problems. Someone who's a very good communicator, because you're going to have to communicate at different levels, in different mediums. Someone who can facilitate conversations and then has authority and influence, because they're going to have to influence the customer to do things that they don't want to do. They're going to have to deal with escalations. They're going to have to push back. You want people with good commercial instincts, so people who aren't maybe acting commercial, but they think commercially. Good business and technical skills. So, there's a whole gamut, but I think there's some baseline skills, and then you layer on top of that, I think, the specifics you need to add value internally and with customers.
Got it.
I just want to add one other thing to that. So every single thing that you said, Rob, is spot on. And I think in the new age that we're in, I'm also looking for folks that are analytical and data driven. Yes, the qualitative side of things is incredibly important, but being able to take a look at a set of data, especially in Series A and Series B, when you do not have resources available to you to do that for you, you have got to be scrappy and be able to figure out how to run your SQL queries if you need to, figure out how to pull the data you need, know what data you need to pull, what story you're trying to tell with that data. So I also look for folks who do have that component, and it doesn't need to be everyone on my team. I look at my team holistically and say, okay, we need these 20 skill sets. Do we have them covered? If we do not, how do we get them covered? So that especially in the earlier stages, when you don't have those resources internally, you have to fill those gaps.
Miranda, so I just want to ask Miranda, so would you layer onto that from a behavioral point of view, things like being scrappy, being a self-starter,
Absolutely.
Using data. It's kind of much more the behavioral things you would layer on top of the competencies, right?
Absolutely. And it's a little bit harder to interview for somebody if they're scrappy, right? Give me an example of when you were scrappy, right? That's a little harder to interview for. It's more of something that you
That's
just
a good question.
are. It's just, you just are, right? So I build my own tools. I write my own queries. I do my own analytics, right? I'm an early stage startup leader. And that means I have to get my hands dirty, but I expect my team to be right there alongside of me, getting their hands dirty too.
Yeah. How do you prioritize when you don't have a lot of tools at your disposal? Great interview question, right? So yeah.
All right, that's great input. Then you mentioned something like the importance of this department, which brings me to another thing that very often when we talk to the teams, and it's kind of very different from SaaS company to SaaS company what we experienced so far. So the question I have is like, where would the CS team be best placed now? Like under in what department is it? Is it reporting to the CEO? Does it have a board a seat in the board? Where, in your opinion and your experience, should it be placed? And also, follow-up question, where do you actually see it placed, given your experience when you talk to those SaaS companies? Maybe, Jay, for you, as you work with a lot of SaaS companies, what's your experience, what you actually see, and what's your opinion where it should be instead?
Yeah, so great question. Where we actually see it is a couple of different places. One, it could get stuck under operations. Sometimes it gets stuck under a CFO. Sometimes it gets stuck under chief revenue officer. And I think all those are sort of the wrong place for it to begin. It really needs to report to the CEO. And there's probably nobody who's surprised to hear me say that, or any of us say that on this call. So, you look at companies like SAP. SAP has a board area that's called customer success. And so there's a representative who reports into the CEO who is responsible for owning customer success across all of SAP, right? A massive, massive company. I think it's very tempting for a busy CEO to delegate customer responsibility down under one of these other roles, but it's not operations, right? It's not, there are operations involved, lots of them, as we've talked about on this call. But it's not an operational thing purely. It's this blend between the marketing conversations we want to have, the value proposition, and the way we deliver it. And ultimately, I think as a function, the customer-facing organizations have to really have a close tie into the CEO. That being said, again, maybe another platitude here, but is that customer success isn't just a function. It's actually a whole way of operating the business and making sure everybody is aligned. So I think what's even more important than necessarily where the customer success team reports is the fact that the CEO is sort of presiding over all of the metrics, right? So there's some kind of recurring forum where the CEO is looking at the customer health metrics alongside all the leaders in the departments. The outcome metrics, the delivery quality metrics that we're tracking, whether it be in support or the product uptime or all those other things that are happening behind the scenes, implementation, ticket resolution times. And so having the CEO have weekly insights into that and any deviations that are happening there is a really important sort of thing for them to own.
And what's your practical experience? Where is it indeed? Now we talked about where it should be, and you see a lot of SaaS companies as well. Where is it actually? Like from your experience, how often is it placed right?
Probably about, I don't know, I don't see all the SaaS companies, but I'd say about 50% of them have a senior vice president of customer success that reports to the CEO, that sits in the executive team meetings. But again, you're going to find a lot of variation between that on company stage and size.
Yeah. I think to that point, Miranda mentioned it earlier, Philip, is so much of this depends on where you are and what stage you are at a company, right, Miranda? In so much as in the early stages where you haven't even maybe got product market fit yet, it's not uncommon to find that actually the product organization is the right place to be because what CS is actually trying to do is accelerate you getting product market fit, right? Over time, as you start to get your product market fit done and your go-to-market motion, you're building your sales muscle and motion, having the team actually aligned into sales is not a bad idea. It promotes a really good alignment, especially if you're a consumption-based product. I only have one product, and the way I make more money is to get them to consume more, right? Then have them in sales. But I think eventually, if you get to a point where the customers become so complex that actually dealing with those customers requires more than a CSM, that's when you should be thinking about a customer organization with an SVP that rolls right into the CEO, because that is actually a good indicator that because of the sophistication and size of business we're now closing, it needs its own organization.
I have some really strong opinions on this. Now, I do want to recognize, as always, that it's going to completely depend on, the size of the company, really to what you just spoke to, right, Rav? But me personally, I will not accept a VP or SVP of customer success role that does not report directly to the CEO. I've turned down offers of, you will report to the SVP of sales. I'm like, this isn't going to work for me. And I believe wholeheartedly, because there is a conflict in interest, and there is a conflict in the goals that are owned in those teams. And also, I believe wholeheartedly that if you want to join a company that really values customer success, let me restate that. You want to join a company that really values customer success. You want to join a company that understands what customer success can drive and the value it brings. And if they're just bucketing you under some other VP or some other department, and you're not getting that seat at the table, and you're not having that direct communication with the CEO or even the COO, I've reported to a COO and it was wonderful. One of those two, then you're going to have an uphill battle for everything from your budget, from things that you want to do. It's usually an uphill battle. So I just downright refuse to report to anyone but those two.
Look, I would agree. I have once worked for an SVP of sales, but that was a very rare circumstance of that person having a thorough understanding of how important CS was. So I think he was an outlier. So I agree. I agree. I would say, though, Miranda, that if you're in a company where sales and CS have diverging goals, then there's a bigger problem than where CS should sit. You've got a much bigger problem there now.
Totally.
But it's more common than what you realize, Ralph. Much more common than what you realize.
It is also from my experience. Yeah. Guys, thank you so much. My time is up. I think I'm handing over back to Rick again. Now I'm just a bit scared to close my browser, and I don't want to end this call, but let's hope this works. For the audience, if you guys don't see Rick joining in a minute, simply hit the reconnect button, the red reconnect button on the top, and you should be fine.
We've had enough practice about getting back in.
Yeah.
So
thanks guys for joining the panel. It was great. It was a huge help for the audience, I'm sure. Thank you guys so much, and we stay connected, and see you soon, guys.
We're still here.
We've done it successfully twice now, so
we've proven value of this platform.
We've achieved our outcome.
We have not changed the platform only once.
Way.
I don't know what it's like where you guys are, but it is boiling hot in London today. I'm really struggling.
It's going to be, I'm in Pleasanton area, California, and we're going to be probably about 95 degrees. So, yeah, it's really hot.
And this is how you re-enter the room.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I mean, thank you, panel. It's been great. We've learned so much from this, Remco, Philip, and I, about how to run a seminar where we've got 6 potential presenter slots and only 1 for the 3 of us. But we've also learned so much from all the technical expertise, your experience, your insights, the knowledge that you've stored up through all of that, experiential stuff that you can't learn except by doing it, right? And one of the reasons we chose the 5 of you is because of the sort of the diversity of that experience that you've had. And I think that's really come across. And I hope very much that everyone has got as much out of it as I have. And I've really enjoyed it, apart from the slight panicking around, making sure the technical stuff works. But basically, I feel it's been a very, very successful event. I'm very grateful to our panel of experts, thank you so much. You've been kind enough to share your knowledge, experience, and expertise so generously. We've recorded this. We will get the recording out as soon as we can. We'll do a little bit of editing, get rid of the gaps and that sort of thing, and we'll release a link to it once we've completed that editing process. Might take us a day or two. Please be patient. But we've got all of your email addresses when you registered, so we'll be sending that out to everybody. Philip, Remco, and I, we realised that in this short couple of hours, we have not been able to answer even the 3 questions that we posed, let alone answer the question of what will be the new normal for customer success. And we knew that from the outset. We knew we didn't have the time to get to grips with such a complex and broad topic. But quite frankly, we also realised that that there was still a lot of value in starting to talk about these things. These questions are unanswerable for the time being. We're not through the crisis. We are not at the end of it. But the 3 things, the topics that we chose, we feel are things that coming out of COVID-19 almost has given us more insight in a way, actually, to what really is important in customer success. And we hope that that's opened up some thinking for everybody here. So 3 important topics for all of us in the customer success profession, perhaps to be thinking about right now as we begin to emerge from the worst of the pandemic, start to pick up the pieces and get ourselves and our customers back onto a more even keel. We hope you found it to be useful. And really, it just remains for me just once more, if I may, to remind you, please, as a favor to us, to complete the webinar evaluation. You'll see it in the chat window there. It's really important to us. The URL's on there. Just to say thank you finally to our panelists, Irit, Miranda, Christy, Jay, Rav. On behalf of Philip Wolf from Custify, who you saw earlier, Remco de Vries, who you saw earlier still from Insided, and myself, Rick Adams at Practical CSM, CSM.com. Thank you very much for giving up your time on an entire...
Sirs, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Our absolute pleasure. And finally, of course, thank you. If you registered and attended, there would have been no point in us doing this if you hadn't. Thank you for those who actually contributed into the chat window. There's some great conversations going on. And final point, once again, please fill out the eval. Please tell us what topics you'd like us to chat about in the future, and we'll be on that case for you. So I'm going to end the session now. Really appreciate your time. Have a fantastic rest of the day, however much that is. And we hope to see you again on a future similar panel debate that we'll be holding. Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye, guys.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.